It's a difficult thing to try to recapture the feeling of the old classics. For me, every time I play one of those throwback RPGs made by an indie developer, they can never quite capture the exact feel of the games they're trying to replicate. This is not to say that any of those indie games are bad, a lot of them are quite good. But for some reason, none of those games really hit me the same way as the game they're trying to emulate. Which brings us to Am Setsuna. Am Setsuna is attempting to be the spiritual sequel to Chrono Trigger. All the advertising around this game was, this is the throwback you've been waiting for. We're creating a team specifically to do what you want us to do, which is giving yourself an incredibly high bar to clear. And usually I wouldn't compare a developer's first game to a classic, but when that's what your entire marketing campaign was about, that's what we gotta do. So does Am Setsuna hold up to Chrono Trigger? Not really, I don't think it does. But I think this game is still worth your time if you go into it with the right mindset. Am Setsuna follows, well, Setsuna. She has to go on a pilgrimage with her companions to the Forgotten Lands. Once they get there, they plan on sacrificing her to reduce the monster population. Wait a minute, this is Final Fantasy X. Not only is this game a spiritual sequel to Chrono Trigger, it also takes a lot of inspiration from Final Fantasy X, which again is a massive hurdle to overcome. 10 is one of the best Final Fantasy games, and a lot of that is because of how good that story is. While Setsuna is the main character of the story, you actually play as a silent protagonist named Indir. I do not like silent protagonists. I understand it's supposed to be like, you're the protagonist, that's why he doesn't speak. I just can't stand how the characters all kind of talk around them, so conversations have a lot of gaps, where one character will say something, and then they'll just respond to themselves like the protagonist had said something. It really bothers me, and I'd much rather have a fully voiced protagonist. This is not a problem that's exclusive to Setsuna. I think a lot of games that have silent protagonists are held back by this aspect. This game is also very somber. You know from the get-go that Setsuna is not gonna make it through this adventure. What really solidifies that somber tone is the world design. This entire world is covered in a constant snow, which makes it feel like that even the world isn't happy about what needs to be done. This melancholy atmosphere leads to some beautiful backdrops, but by the end of the game, I was pretty done with it. There's only so many ways you can see a frozen forest, a frozen cave, a frozen town, weird ancient technology room. I understand what they were going for, but a little more variety would have helped. I really like the character designs of Toy 8. His detailed style really matches the somber tone of the game. The only other game he did the art design for was Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I haven't played that one, it's on the list, I'll get to it eventually. The 2D art style translates really well into the 3D models. The characters have like a claymation or action figure kind of feel. That combined with these environments makes it feel like you're playing with some action figures on a diorama. The overall art style feels like a more cleaned up version of the Final Fantasy remakes on the DS. That was the first way I played Final Fantasy 3 and 4, so I'm pretty nostalgic for that art style. The only other game that has given me that same feeling is ironically called Nostalgia. I will make a video on that game eventually. That's a hidden gem if I've ever seen one. Quick edit here, while making this video I actually found out the DS remakes of 3 and 4 were made by the same team that did Nostalgia, which explains why the art styles are so similar. Either way, point still stands. The journey Setsuna goes on is presented with fixed camera angles with the world map in between major areas. I think this has to be one of the slowest walk speeds on a world map I have ever seen. It is agonizing walking from place to place. I would dread seeing the item sparkles on the map because that meant I would have to walk all the way over there and then all the way back to where I was at for my current objective. You needed those items, so you definitely have to go get those. But man, my heart would sink when I would see that sparkle on the far side of the screen. This is only a problem on the world map because your walk speed in the major areas is perfectly fine. On top of that, each area is only about 2 or 3 screens long, so you can really burn through these areas if you know where you're going. When you're exploring these areas, they have on-screen enemies, so ideally you'd be able to dodge and weave to get around the enemies if you wanted to. But I think they really should have just used forced encounters. With how the enemies are placed and how your party moves, it's actually really hard to dodge the enemies. So it's better to just fight everything and try to get an advantage, as opposed to trying to dodge and then getting hit with the back attack. When the battles do eventually start, they are using the Chrono Trigger battle system. So that means we're using an active time battle system where you can hold on to characters' turns and combine the characters' abilities for dual and triple techs. The basic framework set up by Trigger is still fun even in the modern day. Setsuna does make some changes to the battle system. Its main change is the momentum gauge. Each character's momentum gauge fills as they take damage or perform actions. You're able to hold up to 3 charges of momentum. When you perform an action, you can spend that momentum to either increase the damage or add special effects. I think you can also spend momentum when you're about to take damage to reduce it, but I never got that to work. Either I was doing it wrong or I didn't have the right accessories equipped. If anybody does know, please comment below because I was really confused by that. The thing that makes the gameplay worse than Chrono Trigger is how leveling up and skills are required. When you level up, you only get HP and MP increases. All other stat gains are based on weapons. So your attack damage, magic defense, all that good stuff, all based on what weapon you have equipped. You can use items to forge and upgrade the equipment, but there's no point in doing that because when you get to the next town, there's going to be an inherently better weapon. So I hoarded all of those upgrade materials unless I needed just a little bit of a stat boost to get through that area, or when I was planning out my endgame weapons. You can also equip talismans to each character. Talismans come with a couple different benefits. So they have a passive skill, a flux skill, and it also controls what abilities you can equip. So the passive skill speaks for itself. It's an ability that goes on in the background. The flux skill is a skill that has a random chance to attach to an ability. So at the end of battle, there's a random chance for the flux skill to activate, and whatever flux skill you have equipped on that talisman, stuff like increased damage, lower MP costs, added stat effects, and stuff along those lines, will attach to one of the abilities you used. This is cool, but I really didn't consider this when I was planning out which abilities I wanted equipped. The most important part of talismans is what type of sprite knight they could equip. So all command abilities and most passive abilities are equipable items, and you can acquire these by finding different materials throughout the world or through enemy drops. I do not like this system. The first reason I don't like this is because if you're unlucky with drops, you can get screwed out of some really good abilities. The second reason is that since each ability is movable, I would constantly move abilities in and out to test out new things, and I could never keep track of which abilities had dual or triple techs. So I spent most of my playtime with about 2 or 3 dual techs available in any given party. And to compare it back to Trigger, once you learned an ability, it was always equipped. So when you move party members around, you can easily see all the combinations available. The hassle of moving abilities around really de-incentivized experimentation, especially when I was trying to get through some dungeons or grinding, and I had some really good nuke abilities that would just clear the encounter out as fast as possible. Efficiency won out over experimentation. The soundtrack is pretty unique because it only uses the piano. This is to reinforce the somber tone of the entire game. I think piano might be the saddest instrument, not that it's sad that you can play it, but it just sounds sad at times. The piano also gives the soundtrack the feel of like a middle school play. I mean that in the best possible way. When you combine the claymation art style with the more low-key soundtrack, the whole game feels like someone putting on an old school puppet show of a classic fairy tale. The track Lost really embodies the directionless feeling you get after losing something important. The battle theme No Turning Back is the closest this game gets to sounding like an SNES Final Fantasy game. And finally, Path of Redemption. This song is used for a lot of character moments and is a perfect fit for when they have to stand up against their cruel fate. Moving on over to the spoilers, so skip this if you don't want to hear any of the spoilers. Waiting. Okay, we should be good. The first spoiler I want to talk about is about the character of Nadir. Nadir is the Orin of the group. He's the old warrior who's already kind of been on this journey before. Initially, I liked the twist with him because he had been on this pilgrimage, but his pilgrimage had failed. And he had spent the time between then and now killing as many monsters as he could to make everybody think that the pilgrimage was a success. That's great, I really like that. But then seemingly out of nowhere, it's revealed that he's Setsuna's real father, and it's never brought up again. I don't understand why they added this plot twist, especially because there's a guy in Setsuna's village who says he's Setsuna's father, and they look almost the exact same. Why would you bring it up and then never comment on it again? It's weird, I don't like it. And on the same lines of bringing something up and then never talking about it again, the main character of Indir was initially a mercenary that was hired to kill Setsuna. They eventually run into the guy who hired Indir, and he looks at Indir and is like, hey, don't bring up the fact that I hired you to kill the sacrifice. And then true to his word, Indir never brings it up again. And then the guy who hired him just becomes like an NPC in a different character's storyline. I thought they were going to go into more detail about who that guy was working for, why someone wanted the sacrifice dead. I may have missed something, so comment below if I did, but it just seems like a missed opportunity to me. The last party member to join the team is Fides. So Fides is obviously the magus of Setsuna. The comparisons speak for themselves. Major antagonistic force, uses a scythe, joins up towards the end and is a very powerful party member. But the reason why Magus works and Fides doesn't is that Magus is a fully fleshed out character. They go completely into his backstory, they completely explain his motivations. He's probably the best character in Chrono Trigger. And on top of that, getting him as a party member is optional, so I'm sure a lot of players back in the day completely missed out on him. And Fides joins your party literally right before the final boss. I think there's only one screen from when he joins and when you start the final boss. And then when you do start the final boss, all the characters are giving their big motivational moment of, I am doing this for this reason, I am doing that for that reason. And they look over at Fides and are like, well, we'll figure something out for you eventually. I like how the game fakes you out by making you think that Setsuna is going to survive, but tragically in the end, Setsuna has to sacrifice herself, just in a different way than you expected. This is what brings the cycle to an end, but it's still tragic in a different kind of way. I also really like how the imagery is a direct callback to how Setsuna and Indir met. I Am Setsuna should be seen as a noble attempt by a first-time developer. Even with the backing of Square Enix, this is the first game from a new developer. And in that regard, they did a fantastic job of making a compelling story with compelling gameplay. But I think it's an inherently foolish idea to try to instantly compare yourself to one of the best games in the genre. Because no matter which aspects you do well, in the back of the player's mind they're going to be thinking to themselves, I think Chrono Trigger did that better. Man, I should really replay Final Fantasy X. And with those thoughts in the back of my mind, I think this game needs to be used as a palate cleanser. After I finish some longer RPGs, I kind of hit a void state. In this state, I know I want to play another RPG, but I just can't decide which one I want to do, either because the story is too long or the mechanics are too in-depth, but I know I want to play another RPG. That's where this game comes in. This is going to give you all the JRPG highlights, an interesting story, good mechanics, great visual design, and a nice small package that you can beat in about 20 hours. So you can get that instant dopamine hit of a new RPG while you're thinking about which longer one you want to start next. And in that regard, I recommend I Am Setsuna. It just doesn't do enough on its own to stand out from the classics it takes inspiration from. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know in the comments. And keep following Failing Up Gaming for more reviews.